The year was 1692, and Salem Village was gripped by a fear that no one could explain. Snow still clung to the ground, turning the narrow dirt paths into grey slush. The smell of wood smoke hung in the air as townsfolk hurried between their homes and the small, weathered meeting house at the center of the village. The Puritans of Salem were strict, God-fearing people who saw the devil lurking in every shadow, and that winter they became convinced he had come for them. It began with two girls. 9-year-old Betty Parris, the daughter of Reverend Samuel Parris, had fallen ill. She would scream uncontrollably, fall into strange fits, and contort her body in ways no doctor could explain. Soon after, her cousin Abigail Williams began showing the same symptoms. They claimed to see visions, a tall, dark man whispering in their ears, shadowy figures creeping at night. The village physician, unable to find any physical cause, made a chilling declaration: witchcraft. Within days, the entire village buzzed with fear. Neighbors accused neighbors, and suspicion spread faster than the winter wind. Reverend Parris called a special gathering in the meeting house, where the frightened villagers packed shoulder to shoulder under the dim glow of lanterns. Betty and Abigail were brought before them, their small frames shaking, their faces pale. When asked who had bewitched them, the girls named 3 women. Tituba, the Parris family's enslaved servant from Barbados; Sarah Good, a destitute beggar who wandered the streets; Sarah Osborne, a woman who had long been at odds with the church. The 3 women were dragged to the meeting house, their wrists bound. The crowd watched as Reverend Parris thundered from the pulpit about the wrath of God and the snares of the devil. Tituba was the first to be questioned. At first, she denied everything, but under pressure, and perhaps out of fear for her life, she confessed. Yes, she said, she had spoken with the devil. Yes, she had seen witches in Salem. And yes, there were others hiding among them. The crowd erupted in gasps. The devil was not just whispering at the edge of the forest, he was in Salem Village itself. From that day forward, the hunt began. Every strange illness, every farm accident, every dead cow was blamed on witches. The young girls began pointing their fingers at more and more villagers, respected farmers, mothers, even a former minister. Some cried out in terror, swearing their innocence. Others stood silent, too shocked to speak. As the weeks passed, the jails of Salem filled with the accused. The village green became the stage for a grim theater of fear. On June 10th, Bridget Bishop became the first to hang. The sun beat down on the gallows as she prayed for God's mercy, the rope tight around her neck. When the trapdoor opened, the crowd gasped, and a hush fell over the field. But instead of quelling the fear, Her death only seemed to feed it. More arrests followed. George Burroughs, a former minister, was accused of leading a secret coven. When he was brought to the gallows, he stunned the crowd by perfectly reciting the Lord's Prayer, something believed impossible for a witch. But the judges ignored the sign, and he too was hanged. The most haunting story was that of Giles Corey, an elderly farmer who refused to enter a plea. The court, desperate for a confession, ordered him to be pressed under heavy stones until he spoke. For 2 days, he lay in the mud, each stone crushing him closer to death. His only words, it is said, were, "More weight." He died without ever confessing, and his land was seized. By the time the hysteria ended in 1693, more than 200 people had been accused, 30 had been found guilty, and 19 had been hanged. One man, Giles Corey, had been pressed to death, and several others had died in prison. When the panic finally subsided, many in Salem were left with a sense of horror at what they had done. Judges and ministers publicly repented, and years later, the colony declared the trials unlawful. But the scars of Salem never truly faded. Some say the spirits of those wrongfully executed still walk Gallows Hill on moonless nights, whispering to those who dare to listen. Others say that Salem was cursed that winter, not by witches, but by fear itself. And perhaps that is the true story of Salem. Not a story of dark magic, but a story of what happens when terror grips a community and turns neighbor against neighbor. Even today, Salem stands as a warning, a reminder of the price of hysteria and the darkness that lives in every human heart.